42 people in the meeting right now. Oh, thank you, Josh. Make that 144. Okay.
All right. Okay. Are we all a go, everyone?
Yes, I think so.
All right, let's begin. Good morning, everyone. This is Jason Broughton, your state librarian here at the Vermont Department of Libraries. I want to thank you for taking the time to come to our webinar today, as we wanted to provide you with some guidance as we are in preparation for reopening per ACCD by way of Governor Scott. We are expecting for the governor to have either verbally an announcement saying that libraries, museums, art galleries, cultural institutions may begin reopening on June 1st, or if it is not specifically stated, it will then be added to the ACCD website, letting everyone know what opportunities there are for those who would like to. In stating that to you, one of my biggest goals is to make sure that we all understand that we are going through a variety of transitions right now, and it was, I would say, very easy to ask to close. But going forward, our biggest thing is now looking at how to navigate reopening if your library chooses to do so. I strongly urge everyone to make sure that they understand that your library is to be community focused. And that means each community will be different. You already know that local control is in play. The department has no jurisdiction to tell you when to open or close, but we can be very thoughtful with perseverance, persuasion, influence to assist you in looking at the best decision. In letting you know that there is going to be a date for opening, our goal per our staff is to ensure if your library would like to open up, we will work to assist you in communicating that to as many people as possible. Or if you would like to not open up, we are here to assist you in communicating that to your community. But that does mean we need to have conversations about what the R's are going to be if you'd like to do either. So the goal is you have to have a plan. So today's webinar is to really talk about all of the things that is to be expected when you are thinking when you want to reopen. With that, as you know, the department is going to be providing, through the service that we have done, some PPE, such as the shields that will be used at a lot of desks that will be forthcoming. Of course, as you know, that is not necessarily on back order, but we're buying locally, and that will take a couple of days. We really deeply appreciate you filling out the survey and letting us know your needs, because our goal is here to assist you with some of the CARES Act funding that we got federally, and making that available to a variety of different libraries. So with that, I thank you tremendously for what you're doing to consider how you want to operate. On another note, we want to make sure that you have what you need. And if you don't, therein lies the challenge of figuring out what types of services you may want to offer to your community. We have heard from a variety of directors quite frequently, and even some town officials. And in saying that it's not a competition, we do understand there is a lot of pressure, and in some cases anxiety, on library directors and trustees by their towns. And I don't think all the towns understand that. And yes, so let's talk about that a bit. In some cases, there are communities where the town basically wants to lay off people because they feel the library is not doing anything. It's not a stand in unison with that. That is, again, an issue of what can we do to assist you at this most difficult time, because you are having a lot of local considerations being tossed your way, and you might feel obligated to do something. Here's where the department can help you. As we, in a sense, assisted in making sure that curbside service could be something that could be considered, even when we weren't all sure exactly how the transmission of COVID was. It was something that we believe was very successful, and allowed a lot of people to see that libraries were indeed vital to what was going on currently. As we transition, Some libraries are going to be able to open up, not exactly fully the way they would like, but do a lot more than what they were. In other cases, please be prepared to only do curbside service. So in stating that, I want to make sure that I go through with you some of the specific items that will be required, because sometimes we haven't thought about those the way that we need to think about them. And to also say, you have to be very flexible. One of the unique things that I have noticed is every time there's been an announcement about what is about to reopen, guess what normally will happen? There is a bit of a change. And you should expect, if the governor announces that on Friday, there will be additional rules that I am not aware of at the current that might come into play that you need to examine before the June 1st. And June 1st is a time frame to say you may begin. I don't really expect a lot of libraries to open on June 1st because a lot of people will be thinking through all of these unique challenges. It's important that you also, and again, have approval from your board. That's going to be a really keystone argument right there, because there's a lot of plans that have to be placed publicly, and there are things that your town and community will need to know that you are doing. So this is going to take a little bit more time than you think. In addition to that, I have a personal and professional request that is added to that. And that is going to be, you're going to be doing two things simultaneously, such as the department itself. We all are experiencing COVID, and we have had to adjust our current continuity of operations plans, or our COOP, and emergency planning. It didn't contain pandemic. So as we're going through this, guess what we're having to do? We're having to rewrite our plans as we go through. And you might say, well, why not wait? We can't wait because all of us know, and you've probably heard this, there will be a second wave that will be coming in the fall and in the winter. We do not know what that exactly looks like, whether it be large, whether it'll be like this, whether it might be none at all. But the goal is you have a plan. So you will also need to have your plan before the fall for what just happened, prepared in the event that something does happen again. So that's an added item that needs to be addressed as well. If you're able to, you should be able to go to the ACD website, Agency of Commerce and Community Development, and there are some specific requirements that are there that all businesses have to have. And this isn't a, oh, we kind of did it, or I know it, or I got it. You're going to have this in writing, and you need to have that with you. The reason being is one of the worst fears and concerns that we could probably all have is to know that our location has become a hotspot. That would be tremendously problematic because it requires a lot of resources that will have to go to it, which would mean VDH, a deep cleaning, closure for a very extended period of time. Once things like that are infiltrated, it takes a large amount of resources to make sure that they are thoroughly there. So, in looking at that, we want to make sure that everyone is aware that you are required, any business must follow VDH and CDC guidelines, which means you need to think about making sure how you're going to do your logistics for when you're in the building with your employees. You want to make sure that you understand who your demographic population is that could be at risk when it comes to employees, and find a way to communicate what work can be done if they have anxieties or you yourself have anxieties about how the work should be done. You're going to need to have proper PPE. In some cases, there will need to be lots of gloves, lots of sanitizer. I do know that in stores that you will find a little bit more of that now. And so things seem to be, in a sense, distributed a little bit more equitably. Gloves are going to be extremely important, in addition to frequent hand washing. One of the things that a lot of people might not also understand is the need for a health safety officer. Yes, you've taken the VOSHA training, but you should be having a health survey questionnaire of some form being done every time there is a shift change, opening up in the morning, or before any employee comes into that facility. That's important, and you're going to need to have a log of that. So someone will need to have that. There can be, if you can find one, a infrared thermometer that will assist. I have not really heard people recommend the old-fashioned thermometers because you would have to have an assortment of those, and that could, again, cause some interesting issues down the line. You must also be able to have access to a lot of soap for hand washing, a bathroom, in some cases, a separate bathroom where hand washing can go for the public if you're going to open it up that way, and definitely one for employees, while also maintaining the 6-foot rule. And that doesn't mean 6 foot in one direction. That is 6 feet in all circumference. People forget that from time to time. Break rooms need to be, unfortunately, shut down per se. You should be able to go in, fix a meal, and head out. Highly recommended by state government right now is try to eat outside while it's nice and warm and sunny. Find places other than a closed, non-ventilated space. Your systems for ventilation need to make sure that there is constant airflow. If you're able to open windows and doors, you should do that. It will reduce the risk of having to touch, particularly doors. Doors should be opened as much as possible so that people don't have to touch them very frequently. But we also understand if you have air conditioning, then you're going to need to figure out how you want to also clean that frequently as well. Additionally, and this is where thought has to come in, you may need to ask, assign, or do this yourself, or if you have funding available, how you want to constantly clean your different areas. That is, again, something that needs to be thought through. Some people have said maybe we should close in the middle of the day and just do a clean. The key goal is you need to constantly clean or set up locations where things can be, in a sense, accessible for sanitation. And remember, cleaning is different versus sanitizing. Think of a good plate that you like to eat off of. When you wash it by hand, it's definitely clean. But if someone were to take a microscope to it or do a swab, it could have bacteria and germs on it. Some of them might actually be healthy for us. The problem, however, is it's not sanitized. So there is a difference between cleaning and sanitation. So we must also keep that in mind that our goal is sanitation because we don't want to, in a sense, continue to spread the disease. You will have to rethink lots of library spaces. It is highly, highly recommended that no browsing occur. One of the reasons that the library is able to be considered to be open is because the recommendation that libraries will, in a sense, follow some of the things that retail will do by not necessarily allowing congregating. We know that that's what our businesses are. Our main purpose is for people to come in for life, labor, love, and leisure to actually constantly browse. Stacks should be limited for browsing completely. And if you do have that, you're going to have to figure out what directions you want them to walk into. So you're going to need to have signage on the floor about directions of how you want that to proceed. And in some cases, you might do a closed stack. In other words, you retrieve everything yourself as opposed to the customer. Again, as libraries open up, this is not the old-fashioned. This is a phased, slow approach. But that can be up to you. Some of you might want to do curbside a little bit longer while looking at how you want to reopen. Others might say, let's go up a step and have people come in and obtain things, but not browse. Others might even be able to say, you are able to browse following the cues that we have on the floor, but you can only be in an area for a certain period of time. If you have been following items when it comes to contact with a person, you need to be in proximity and definitely in conversation for more than about 5 minutes. If you ever have any anxiety of like, oh, I didn't have my mask on, but I was talking with Jason, how close were you? We talked for, then there might be some concerns. Think of it as you're shopping. A lot of us have gone to the stores. We are kind of going in, getting what we need. We might see some people that we know, chat for a couple of seconds and keep going. You're probably going to be fine, unless, of course, the person is sneezing and coughing uncontrollably and is or asymptomatically symptomatic, and you didn't know that. But again, it is for us to rethink our library spaces and what you look like. Library programming. I don't think I need to kind of discuss that. There probably is not going to be a lot of that going on until we see a little bit of clarity. I know that there is a consideration for the governor to expand attendance in groups to uppers of 25 coming very, very soon. And so that might have some people thinking, well, what would that look like? Outdoors, you can do quite a lot of things. Indoors, not really highly recommended. And again, even outdoors, you should be paying attention to the 6-foot rule. As you go through, other factors that are very, very important that people might not have realized, and we don't believe this is the case, is if a library has been closed completely for 7 days or more, you must have something that will actually go to ACCD that will discuss your reopening plans. And that's a very specific item. If you have less, though, than 10 employees, you only need to do the VOSHA training. But if you had a library building that was closed for more than 7 days, had more than 10 employees, then there must be some conversations with the state. And that is where we can assist you within that. They would ask that you take a phased approach by going very, very slow, and that you take appropriate measures to protect your employees who are at a greater risk of contact by virtue of their occupational role or setting. You're going to also need to rethink your employees' job tasks. We all have in our description usually duties as assigned. Remember that catchphrase there, the one that we all dislike? Why am I taking out the trash today? That's not my job. That's where we all have to be a little bit more flexible and understand we might be shifting different types of roles based on a variety of items. In other aspects, it is very important to wear masks. You also want to pay attention to your local community and also to your municipality. If your municipality has passed a rule stating that masks are required, you would need to follow that and you will need to post it. If it has not done so, it is then highly recommended that you, in a sense, post a sign saying that masks are recommended. You don't want to have any confrontations. I don't think in Vermont that there are any issues, but there are some people who might not want to, let's say, follow the recommended guidelines that is being asked by a variety of people. So it is important to post that information if you have a required mask rule by your municipality, or if you have a recommended item. You will find a lot of information on the ACCD site when it comes to signage that can also assist, because there are also ready-made signs. One big caveat that people need to also examine when you're dealing with occupancy load is making sure that you are in one of 3 categories, but the goal is whichever is greater for you. You can have 25% of the approved fire, safety, occupancy. That is one version of it. Or you can go 1 customer per 200 square feet, which means you need to know your square footage of your facility. Or you can do 10 total customers and staff combined, whichever is greater. Now, people need to remember that with the 10, it doesn't mean 10 Vermonters in your library plus your staff. It's 10 total, staff and the Vermonters in the library. And that, again, can cause some unique situations. Within that, you must post your temporary occupancy item during this time as well, along with how you determined that method at all of your entrances. So again, there's a little bit of a work item involved. You can find the signage. You can even find a occupancy total load calculator on the ACT website, and we will also be sending this information out at the end of our webinar to assist you. With that, the goal is to make sure that you have a variety of plans in place. If you have not thought about creating a plan, you need to be prepared to have that, because that's a very, in a sense, legal document for you. Your board might ask you to show us your reopening plans versus let's open the doors and have people come in. Your municipality might ask you for your reopening plans, and you should have them drawn up on what you're going to do. And I highly recommend that you have it in phases, which might mean the first week, you bring all the staff back and you begin to examine The first day could even be just the director and the board. You know, you kind of tour through the building, make sure everything is fine. But you should have a week, in my opinion, of bringing your staff back, making sure everybody feels comfortable, looking where the gaps are at, how is this going to operate, looking at the schedule. That's week one. So even if June 1st comes, you can tell your community, we're actually going to be opening June 15th. But yes, June 1st, we brought the staff back. You then want to then take time to begin looking at other processes that you can begin to navigate, such as the mail, how do you want to collect stuff, and then at the same time, begin looking at how you want to interact with your customers. And that should take you, in a sense, not a long time, but a good, thorough review of where the gaps are at. We had to do the same thing. A large portion of our staff is able to telework, but we do have staff that have not stopped beautifully to do a variety of services to make it available to Vermonters and to state government. But we had to stop and think, how does this work? How are we going to do this? And in my case, it's easier for me just to walk to work. So I've been able to get 2 months to the gallon. Isn't that great? When it comes to driving, 2 months to the gallon. Unheard of gas mileage. With that, I will now open up the floor for a few questions, and then we will have Tom McMurdo talk about the status of the courier service and what to expect as well, as that will be gently restarting. And of course, Jeanette Schaefer will talk about a few items regarding to our purchasing and surveys in a way to assist you with consulting on how to navigate this entire situation. So let's have some questions from the floor on what you're seeing, how you're feeling, and what you might expect, and how we can assist you as we go forward together.
Okay, Jason, we've had a few questions to clarify about the masks, and the questions are really around what if your municipality's decision on masks is different from your library. So municipality does not require masks, but your library board does require. So that is the gist of that question, if you'd like to take that.
That would be a very unique situation. You want to make sure why people well, first you can ask for that. The goal is highly recommended. Even the governor has says that people should be recommended, even though some people are asking for a requirement statewide. With that, my interpretation is to be able to explain to people why that's there. And there are a variety of reasons. You might have a unique demographic population. You can also say it's for courtesy, to make sure it's not all about the people coming in through the door, but it's making sure that we don't spread things with each other. So just make sure that you're able to communicate that. I would also definitely want to make sure that the town is aware of that. And if you have any legal consultations that you can reach out to, that you also have some contact with them, because they can assist you with any types of issues. I would highly recommend, if you are part of the Vermont League of Towns and Cities, connecting with them through their municipality or some form of legal item, because this is not so much an HR for the employees. This is more about communicating outwardly why that's there and the importance of it. I would hope that you don't have any people who would go negative on that, but just make sure that you communicate that to your municipality as to why that is the case, and they should be able to understand. If not, also help you address that issue as well.
Thank you. And then there were two questions about keeping logs of the staff health survey and how long they need to be kept. And we've been researching those questions, and what we can find is 30 days in the event of contact tracing. But Jason, you might know a little bit more about that.
My recommendation, from what we understand it to be, is you're not going to like it. 30 days is the technical. We all know, for example, after so many days with certain types of records, we could throw those away. Since we are experiencing a very unique aspect in all of our lives, you might want to hang on to that a little bit longer. I would probably suggest to you that you hang on to it, not to say until this is all done, but you probably want to hang on to it until next year. Because just file it away. If you're doing electronically, that's also fine, as long as you have a file. And I would suggest keeping that. Now, of course, you can throw it away after 30 days because the assumption is you are going to come in contact after 14 days. And if something happened, that's kind of the time frame. But you never know. Things can go out as far as 6 weeks with some individuals, and it might be very helpful to trace things back if there were a case. So I would recommend keeping it at least for a year.
Thank you. There is another question about masks, and that is, are libraries required to provide them to the public if they require them to wear them?
No, this goes into one of those questions that a lot of people have said, if you walk into a grocery store and they have all have on masks, shouldn't the customers have on masks? Personally, I think that would be very, very helpful, and I do that myself, and I think a lot more people should do it, and a lot of people are doing it, but not everybody does. With that, it depends on how you see yourself positioned in your community. One, that might be a little bit of a financial hardship for libraries to have continual masks to give out, even though there are more disposable masks being available at different types of pharmacies and grocery stores. I know that even handing out cloth masks would be very expensive. So within that, you would have to examine what is your purpose, which is a nice thing to do if you just want to give out masks so people can have them in the community. That's nice, but it's different than saying every person coming through the door is going to be provided a mask. If you were having some form of a unique meeting, that would be highly recommended. If there was even a light way to do programming in the interior with just a few people, that would be highly recommended. But again, that would be a cost absorbing item that you would want to think through, because once that expectation is set, you will need to continue doing this until the duration of COVID is completed, unfortunately.
Okay,
A
thank you.
nice gesture, but
Yeah.
think about that from a cost perspective. That's the only one, not from a health, because we know why you're doing it. It's just prepare.
Right. There were several questions, and this is for the benefit of the folks who are on the phone and who cannot see the chat. There were several questions about the space limitations, and we posted, so there's confusion about the 10 people versus the 25% of fire capacity, and also the question on how do I know what my fire capacity is. You really should speak to your fire chief in your
Correct.
town to see what
Yes.
that is. You might also have it listed in your insurance documents,
If
what
not on
that
the town,
capacity is.
if
Yeah.
well, not all the towns are going to know what the library building is, but if you are paying any form of insurance for that location, someone's going to know what your square footage is, which is allowing you to know that. And definitely the first place should be your fire chief, because that's the easiest person to go to. And if you're unsure, invite them in. They might not have
Yeah.
ever been to a library in a while.
And ACCD also has posted a calculator for square footage that you can calculate your capacity, and that is on their website, and we can also include that in the follow-up to this. So that is a space consideration, and it is confusing because there's the 10 total people, and again, for those of you on the phone, there were some questions about, is it 10 staff, is it 10 people together? Again, we want to clarify. It is 10 people total. That can be
Yeah,
staff,
and
volunteers,
customers.
and customers. So just keep that in mind.
Restaurants have the same thing that we are going through. We are not, and even retail. It is 10 total. Think of it this way: 10 total bodies in the
Yeah.
entire facility. And when I
And
say
there were,
that,
go
we
ahead.
at Department of Libraries, as you know, if you've visited, share a space facility with VHS and also UVM Archaeology, Historical Archaeology. We cannot have more at this moment than 10 people between all three organizations in this building. And if you've been here, you know how large that is. We could easily have probably 20 people across the building and still be fine. But at this moment, it is 10 people in the entire location across all three entities. So that's what you need to prepare yourself for. No more than 10 if you use that model.
Yeah, thank you for
Uh,
that. Go
Jason,
ahead,
this
Tom.
is Tom. I would just like to hop in and say I've been to some of your libraries, and 10 people is a lot for some of you. So got to make sure you can still do that proper social distancing. So that's, making sure that you're safe is the most important thing here.
I do see a question that Margaret Woodruff asked about the online. I would say, Margaret, yes, I have been doing that with our staff. The goal is that you have some form of a log. In other words, what we have nicely is before the employee comes in, they know what the questions are, and they simply send me an email saying yes, 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 which is a positive. If there is some issues, then I would know and be able to kind of have a conversation with them about why they might not be able to enter. So that happens for any employee electronically for us. in some locations, or if you start seeing state government reopening up a little bit more, you might go to a location in state government where you will see a health screener. So before you could enter maybe the DMV, not saying they're doing this, you would be required to have a temperature check and probably ask those questions, and they would be keeping a logbook. Now that's if you can hire somebody or have staff do that, but they also, guess what, should have proper PPE, all the safety items, and be able to also be 6 feet away. So there's a lot to think through if one is going to utilize those means.
Jason, while you're on the topic of let me see, the tracking. So there's several questions about tracking. So we are obviously tracking staff, and the
Yes.
question is, are we also required? Oh, and yes, the staff tracking is daily, to answer
Yes.
Sherry's question.
Mhm.
Can you speak to tracking patrons and
Nope.
okay, so no tracking patrons.
We should not be doing that.
Yep.
That is something that each Vermonter should be doing on their own in the event that they can come in contact with a person. And you might say, well, what happens? Yeah, if something were to happen and someone dropped by your library and at another location, unfortunately, ran into an experience where they might be contaminating or contaminated, then they will come to the library, and that's where they'll have to start asking people, okay, if you visited on this day, can not the library, but all call will probably go out to say, if you visited this library on this day, could you please contact us? I would not recommend tracking those individuals coming in. We don't see stores doing that at the grocery stores, as far as where we're at in Barry and different places of Burlington where I've been to. So I would not recommend that at the moment. I understand why you wish to do this, but that is not something that we would want to fall into. That opens up some privacy issues if we aren't careful, along with HIPAA concerns.
Yeah, and there is a webinar that the ALA is offering the recording to about privacy that Laura has posted in the meeting chat, and we can also share with everybody after that might help with some of those considerations.
I see Erica has asked a question about the Battelle, the OCLC, Battelle, and IMLS study. That is still ongoing. We expect to have something within 2 to 3 weeks. They are taking a very in-depth review, and we can add that to our email where you are able to sign up and have email updates on what they are actually doing, but no, they're taking a very, very detailed approach on all types of library items and protocols and processes to ensure that libraries feel very comfortable on what this looks like and what we will need to be practicing going forward. So that is still in play, but we expect to hear some news shortly. I wouldn't say I would probably be the first, but I am connected with the other state libraries who have an interest with IMLS, and they might give me maybe 15 minutes prior to the release to know that. So the minute that I find out when they're going to have the big announcement, or if items come out quicker than normal, I will pass that on to our community immediately.
Okay. Then there are some questions around building size and staff. So even if you have a small, so the question is, we have a small space and our desks are close together, you need to be sure that your staff is 6 feet apart, however
Correct.
you manage that. So that is a consideration. And same with if you have several different rooms, does that change the capacity? I believe the capacity is per building.
Correct.
So even no matter what the layout of your building is, it's really per building. So you still need to make sure that 5 people don't congregate in your one small space. So within your space, they have to be able to be 6 feet apart regardless.
That is important. One way to look at that would be, what we are sometimes forgetting is, even if you're spaced out and the layout is where we're all in our own rooms, there are other side factors that can also spread the contagion. What is your ventilation system like? Do you have proper airflow? Because the virus does not is the best way to say that, places where there is continuous airflow, where things allow it to shift up or down versus just being stagnant. as we begin to learn more about it, we know that places that are stagnant with airflow allow it to remain longer and linger. When there is fresh air or continuous air, it begins to diminish. And so within that, you want to make sure that you have proper ventilation at all times, particularly since this is something that we, if you do have it, even if asymptomatic, is the best way I like to say it is coming off of you. It's either coming out of your mouth, your nose. We breathe. We know that we breathe mist. So you have to think of it that way. That's why a mask is important. And if you are able to have a conversation with somebody, you should be so many feet away, because if you're asymptomatic, you can be spreading it in a variety of different ways. So the goal is to make sure that there is proper ventilation at all times so that the item does not sit in one area where a lot of people unfortunately could walk into a room and get it without it having to actually be picked up physically or by touching. So you want to have proper ventilation as much as possible.
Thank you. There are a lot of questions around volunteers, whether or not you should bring them back, and whether or not they are beholden to the same rules that staff are.
Yes.
The rule is really if your volunteers are helping you staff
Yep.
the library,
That's a
you
worker.
should, yes, they are working in your library, you should consider them your staff. So I think whether or not to have volunteers is really another local consideration that you need to make with your trustees as well. And
Correct.
Jason, if you have
I would
anything to add.
highly recommend that. Treat your volunteers just as you would a paid staff person, even though they are not. They are to go through all the same rules because they're doing library work on behalf of you. And if they're going to be there for a set time, that is what that is. And so you need to make those considerations as well, including you want to be very thoughtful about making sure that your volunteers are, one, willing and able to do, and do not fall into any of the categories that might have them more susceptible to obtaining items. And therein lies some difficult conversations to have. And they must be done properly, and they must be done equitably, and they must be done legally. You should not be telling a person who is in an age demographic bracket for COVID where there could be increased susceptibility, you can't come to work because you're old. You're going to have a civil rights discrimination suit against you if you do that. There is a way to make sure that people understand that there are factors that might limit some of their prior work, but here is the new work that we'd like for you to do. And everybody should understand that. I mean, we've had some library directors tell us we have an 88-year-old volunteer who comes in and she's using a respirator. And I'm kind of like, can we rethink that? Can she do work at home? Can you leave that at the porch? I mean, how does that work? Because we don't want to make sure this person gets sick, but we also want to make sure that this person is seen as vital to the organization and can do what they can to assist. And in other cases, the person will understand that maybe this is not the best role at this best time, but it's a proper conversation to have. You need to, if you are terrified of those conversations, make sure that you connect with an appropriate person. Gary Diesel, who has been helping us out of UVM, is a really great person. Your Vermont Towns of League and Cities is also great to assist. And talking with legal representation on how do you have this type of conversation of this beloved person, in which I might be needing to ask them to not do this type of work or not be able to do this at this moment because of what this is. You need to make sure you do it properly and legally before you run into some unexpected problems or situations.
Thanks, Jason. And then another set of questions about temperature checks and the health check, whether or not if people come in after hours, if that still applies.
Yes.
Anybody coming to work in your building
You need to know.
Needs
And
to
here's
submit
why.
that.
We would hope that this never happens. But let me give you a horrible example. Let's say I'm your library worker. Yes, I'm your library worker. How nice. I decide that I want to come in after hours, but I didn't tell you I was actually going to come in. I just came in on my own. You gave me a key a while back. You didn't know it, but I actually went from room to room. I actually went in the director's office. I sat down at your computer and played with it just a bit because I need to get something off because mine wasn't working. And let's say 2 days later, I told you that I was in there. One, you're not going to feel very happy, and you're really not going to be happy if I tell you, I just went to VDH and they told me that I am asymptomatic. That means your entire location is probably going to need to be locked down and cleaned, because if I am found to be in a sense, susceptible to COVID, I probably just spread it all around your library. You need to know who is coming and going as far as your employees into the facility at all times. Even if we trust the person, that is not the issue. The issue is we don't know who exactly is asymptomatic because we don't have as many tests as we would like. And to take precautions, you simply need to know, because if the person does tell you, hey, I got sick, I just need for you to know that, you can then make a really immediate decision to say, where were you? Where'd you go? Did you just go to your room? All right, fine. But even then, you're going to have to make some precautionary and safety items and adjustments. So you need to know who is going and coming from a variety of reasons at all times of day when it comes to staff.
Yeah, and then the question of taking temperature. So obviously the state recognizes that thermometers are not available, as Jason has said earlier, the infrared touchless ones, but you are required to try your best to get thermometers if you can, and then also do the temperature check. So that was a question about that.
And here again, it goes into the honesty compartment. A lot of us know that we're driven to want to do things, but at this time, the goal really is you have to be upfront with yourself. And as much as we want to get out and do some things, if you feel under the weather, make sure that people feel comfortable to tell you that, because we do innately, particularly in our profession, know that we want to be seen as helpful. That's an ulterior drive that we all have as to why we work into a library. We want to help with information and books and different types of items. But it also means you have to say no to yourself sometimes. So even if you know it's an allergy, other people might not view it that way. And technically, you're not fully healthy and well the way you might like to be. That headache that you found lingering, you need to be able to tell somebody, yes. And they can, in a sense, assist you in making sure that you have a good decision on whether you should be coming into work or not. And I know that's a hard thing for a lot of people to accept, but yes, it might be time where you tell yourself, you know, I actually don't really feel that good. You might not be in a good position to come to work. And I know that can feel unfortunate, but that is one of the best things we can do right now until we, in a sense, get ourselves to having much more distributive and dispersive testing where we can know very quickly what that looks like.
Thank you. And then Joy made a comment as a follow-up to somebody who said the checking would also would include trustees who have a key who might just come in the
Of
library.
course,
And
of
Joy
course.
actually had a really good comment, and that is now is a good time to see who has the key to your library, who might be in and out, and to make sure that they understand that they can't just be floating in and out. There is a question, Wendy asked, her municipality is asking that they do health checks on patrons, which I do not
Mm,
believe we have to do besides putting signs on the doors asking them to
correct.
stay away.
That is not anything that we have asked, nor ACCD, nor the state of Vermont, nor the agency of administration that we reside. That for us goes a little bit beyond what is required and can get into some privacy and confidentiality or even some HIPAA concerns. So you want to make sure that you talk with your town on that and make sure that there's an understanding.
Thank you. And I'm scanning additional questions here. Summer hot, air conditioning is on. How does that play into the distribution? Not sure if CDC has anything to say about that. I don't know if Jason, you know anything about that in particular.
Not anything I know. All we have been reading about, though, is, of course, the assumption, and that's the best way to say that, that, oh, it's not as problematic during warmer temperatures? Well, there can be a variety of other reasons. We do know that sunlight does have an impact on COVID-19. Again, people are studying this, so I don't have any clarifying, but I can say generalized, yes, we know that sunlight does item. We know that warmer temperatures play into that, but there can also be some other reasons. When it's warmer, guess what we're all doing? We're going outside. We're kind of distributed outwardly. The winter, yeah, we're much more inside. We're much more intimate. We're in closer contact. So within that, I don't want to say that, yes, having the library open with no air conditioning and sun peering through the roof is going to be the best thing for you. Might catch the books on fire, but it probably is going to make everybody uncomfortable to begin with. So yes, a warmer temperature will have an impact, but we are unsure exactly what that means.
Jeanette, if I could just add one thing.
Sure.
This is Tom. What I've been reading is that moving air is way better than still air.
Yes,
So if you have an
completely.
air conditioning system, it's going to move the air around. Fans are good. Open windows are particularly good, just in what I've been reading about it. So
Oh,
keep
one
that air
aspect of
moving
what
in
you
your
said, Tom.
interior spaces. Yes.
I would, one caveat, because this did come out, please make sure when you do have your ventilation system working, and we know that we want to do this when it's hot, I would highly suggest that you keep an eye on people standing in front of the blower. You wouldn't want any sick people blowing that around the library. So it's important. Again, it's all about moisture. And if a sweaty person is standing in front of the air conditioner and they might be asymptomatic, that's blowing all across your library. And there is a study on that, that yes, in a restaurant where a person was hot, they stood near the air conditioner, didn't know that, and the surrounding patrons who were eating got sick, and it was traced back to a restaurant and then specifically to a specific group of people sitting in a location.
Okay, and then we have questions again about contractors, tenants, and all of those people coming into buildings, whether they need to be
Yes,
tracked, and your health and safety officer should really check with them.
they really should be tracked because they're coming to do work on your behalf, including if it's a check. When we have the state of Vermont come to the Department of Libraries, they have to check in with us, and they have to also have a mask. And if they don't, we have a few that we would, between ourselves and BHS, would give to them, but they come in and they let us know that they feel fine. They are constantly doing work, so they go through the same screening as well because they're going to be there for an extended period of time.
Okay, and then way up the chat was a question that I thought we could address and clarify is about the browsing, whether or not to allow browsing, and is that to avoid people congregating, or is that to avoid people touching stuff, or both?
That is both. The high regard right now and concern that I would say in my discussions, and I know some people said, oh, I wish we had a little bit longer. But June 1st was one of the items that was a consideration, and it's an approach that I think is very helpful to having a slow start up of what we look like as libraries because we're all so unique and all so diverse with the work that you're doing. My best professional opinion on this is it is going to be hard to stop somebody who wants to see something really quickly. Therein lies the challenge, which people do in stores very well, because I do it, unless you have people who don't care, and I haven't seen that very much. You want to be able to have guides on the floor with some form of note, if you can, that says how long a person should be within a space. You really, though, want a person to kind of transition quickly. There shouldn't be a place where we did it the old way. You come in, I can kind of talk to the library director for 15, 20 minutes. Right now, there is to really be no congregating. So a person coming into your library will need to come in, get what they need, and kind of gently depart. I would not really recommend people being allowed to stay and linger and browse. There might be an interesting setup if you were able to do it like a grocery store where you have a queue kind of going through the stacks, but people need to keep walking as that's going to be the main goal. And if that's not possible, it would be very hard to police that because then you're going to be seen as the old-fashioned grouchy librarian. Instead of saying, shh, you're going to be, move it along, keep moving.
And Jason, would you address the question, there are two questions actually about computer use in the library, which you talked a little bit about already, and then also how ideas on how we can help people on the computer. And just a side note, we have some resources in our reopening resource on computer cleanliness and hygiene, but there's a larger issue here on whether or not
So
we're
we're
allowed.
talking primarily about the public computers. I would
Yes.
highly, again, recommend signage be created to ask, if at all possible, to bring your own device. BYD. That's going to be very helpful to your library if it can be done. In the situations where it cannot, here is where you have to now be very, very thoughtful and very, very health conscious on looking at that. You want to look at what is that purpose. You might need to reconsider time that a person is on the computer, because remember, the goal is now not for us to have lots of congregating in the library. If you allowed 1 hour at the public computer, you might want to rethink that to a lower time to kind of get on and get off. It might allow a chance for the person to clean it. If you think that that is something that you'd like to do with a station nearby to do so, or each time a person finishes, you have a gap which allows you to go over and clean it. Again, I'm offering you all the choices. Feasibility needs to be considered. And again, I must say this because I'm part of this club. We all join this profession because we like to help. Sometimes, however, we know that we want perfection because we'll tell ourselves, of course, I can let 100 people in use the computer and I can clean after 100 people. Can you really do that each time without interruption? Can you really have the wherewithal to do that? Please don't work yourself into perfection. Now is not the time for that. You are human. We're all going to make mistakes. We're going to forget. And guess what? We get tired. And right now, we are all tired. I can tell you, I have weird, interesting dreams because I sleep so hard because of COVID. Weird and interesting, but I need to go see my own psychiatrist. That's another topic. But within that, it's important that you look at what is feasible if you offer public computers and a way that they can be cleaned properly after each usage. That is what you have to think about. And remember, not a lot of congregating should be done.
Thank you, Jason. And I want to just keep tabs on the time. We had an hour set aside and we
Well,
have
we can
about
kind of go a
5 more
little bit more
minutes.
if people are able. I am
Okay.
not saying free, but I can go an additional 30 minutes if people want to ask. Because our goal today is to give you as many thoughtful considerations. It is up to you who's going to put this in practice. And just know that all of our consultants, including myself, are again here to assist you. If you have any types of, not problems, but commentary that you feel is a little bit difficult or challenging, we are here to go through that with you. And our goal is to say, if you feel I would like to offer something, we can try to help you think through that and give you your best examples. Or if you say, I want to try to fully open up, we might not be as positive, but we will say, let's look at that. Let's see how we can make that happen for you. And if you say, I actually want to remain closed, but I believe I'm going to have a lot of pushback, let us help you and, in a sense, think through that, because we might be able to come out or be a voice that we can speak to some other people. Because again, this decision is yours. And asking for the restart, which again, there are some other factors at play. This is a small window, not to going into normal. It's a variety of circumstances in the sense of, from the agency administration, libraries are seen right now as an important part of mental health. We don't want to go into those topics, but we know suicide attempts are increasing. Domestic violence has increased. Large percentages of us are drinking more. And in some cases, hopelessness has now arrived on the scene. I can say the secretary, Suzanne Young, was extremely impactful in saying that she believes that libraries can help a community right now through a variety of interesting social challenges. And you are doing that beautifully. Even in the smallest of ways, you are doing that. So our goal is taking one step at a time. June 1st is a date on the calendar. It does not mean your community is going to demand you open up at 9 a.m. on June 1st. It means you can alert them. We have the ability to open up, and we will be doing so very, very soon if you choose to do that.
So, Jason,
I don't have access
I
to
would
chat, and I
suggest.
wonder if I could ask a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, sorry, I don't have access to the chat. This is Almy from the Waterbury Public Library. First, thank you, everybody. 2 questions. One is, what about health surveys for other people who enter our building? Do we treat them just like patrons, or people, I'm talking about people like the town facilities person comes in to check on things, the custodian is there, the mail carrier comes in, the courier person comes in. Do we have to health check all of those people?
You should do that because they're going to be doing some work on your behalf, and they will probably be there for more than a brief couple of minutes. And within that, it's important to just make sure that they are healthy and well, and within that, make sure that they're able to respond and give you accurate information, just in the event that if something were to happen, you would be able to say, yes, this person visited on behalf of the library to do this type of work.
What if they're only there for 30 seconds to drop off the mail?
Now, therein gets into one of those unique types of items. On the safe side, I would still ask it because that's different than versus a patron, which is a little bit, more privacy and confidential and HIPAA. But anything to me related to library work on your behalf should be within the realm where this person can have a question of, are you okay to drop this off? How's it going? Do you feel fine? Thank you so much, and out the door.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question is something that came up at our large-ish library meeting the other day about unattended children, and there were sort of 2 trains of thought. One is that some people are very concerned about not being able to manage the use of space of unattended children in the building, and the other side of the coin was, is that discriminating or denying services if we change our policies to say, children under X age can't come in the library right now unless they're attended by an adult?
That's a very unique library policy. And before COVID, unattended children have always been an interesting topic for libraries. Again, here's where we want to be thoughtful, but at the same time, there are some health concerns with it, and there might even be some legal ramifications if we're not careful. Let's start off with the old phrase that we have heard that our parents or our loved one used to give us: no good deed goes unpunished. Taking that on means that you also take on the legal obligation if a person is left unattended at your library. I've had that experience as a director in Savannah. I, in the sense of, was shutting down a library, and some teenagers came in, very young, and unfortunately, their parents dropped them off, not knowing that the library had changed its time to close. The mean thing would have been for me to hop in my car and drive off, but you don't leave 2 young women like that. I felt obligated, and also I believe it was legal for me to stay and make sure that someone trusted would either be coming to pick them up, their parents would be coming back, and their parents came back and got them. And so you want to be very mindful of this. It does mean during this time, you can change your library policy. That, of course, should be approved by your board and communicated to your town rather quickly versus, oh, we didn't kind of know. The reason why is we are in very unique times, and you want to be able to convey that as to why you don't have the staffing capacity to monitor the children as adequately needed for safety and for health and wellness. Because if somebody gets sick at your library, even though you meant well, you never know what those ramifications could be. So during this time, I would highly suggest that that be a consideration to change the policy. And if you are going to have children come in, that everybody understands what the rules are and what the expectations are and how to get in contact with a person if there is an issue. But that becomes, guess what, a little bit more like babysitting. But again, we know our communities. So it's not saying if you trust a person, it's make sure that you have what you need first to make sure it could work comfortably, correctly, and safely. If not, I highly suggest against it until this time is passed.
Thank you.
Hello,
Thanks.
this is Val. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
This is Valerie from the Sheldon Library, and I have a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
One is,
Go ahead.
we are in a library/town clerk building. Doors are separated. There are separate rooms. In the room situation you were talking earlier, do we have to include the town clerk staff and possible people in there in our maximum capacity?
Ooh, if you're in one building,
It's one
that's,
building.
yes,
You enter
that is
the
what the
main
thought
entrance,
is.
so it would have to
It,
include them also.
yes, that is, now the town should be having some guidance with you on that, but
Okay.
that is what the consideration is, where it's one facility.
Okay. That answered both questions. Thank you.
Anybody else on the phone that has questions that didn't have a chance to answer? And again, we will make the chat available and all of the questions and answers along with some resources and updates.
Jeanette, since we're running a little over, why don't I just give a brief summary of what's going on with Courier as Jason promised earlier? Does that work for
Sure.
everybody? Okay. First of all, I want to say we sent this invitation out yesterday afternoon, I think, for this meeting today. We had 176 people here at the peak. I think that speaks to how serious everyone is taking this and how much you value your community and your library. And I want to say that we love working with you. It's very impressive that so many people were here at this meeting today. Courier, yep, Courier is running. Those of you who are on the Courier system, April is sending out a weekly solicitation to say, do you want to get back on the Courier? Because if you do, you can. Items are moving around. What we're doing at the Department of Libraries is when we receive material, we're quarantining it for 4 days, which we feel like in combination with the transit time is probably enough time. As Jason said earlier, the results of the study are not in yet, but we feel that that's probably close to a week total time if you think about the transit time. So we feel okay with that right now. We should have a little more firm information with that coming up. That is just what we're doing. That is not written in stone by any means. So use your best judgment about that for items that are circulating. I think, and April can hop in and correct me here if she needs to, but I think we're approaching 60 libraries on Courier. We have gone with a new vendor, as many of you know, that is a priority. So open enrollment for that will come up in October. So those of you who are interested, who maybe were denied by the previous Courier, please ask to get added again. We are fairly optimistic that we'll be able to expand the network with the new vendor. So please reapply. There'll be lots of warning about that, and April will send out information about that. Just some quick facts about the Courier. Last year in 2019, 105,000 items roughly went through the Courier. That saved Courier libraries over USPS almost $235,000. So this is an ongoing success story, and we really won't rest until everybody is part of it. So we're working toward that. And again, those of you who are thinking about ILL, please, I encourage you to get back on the Courier if you're a Courier library so we can get stuff moving around. Okay, that's it, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yep, there are a few questions, Tom. Are we sure materials are not being physically handled by Courier personnel? And then are they required to wear a mask or two? And April already answered, is there a list of libraries, Courier or not, who have resumed ILL? And April responded that the interest form should be going up in late June or early July to join Courier service. Oh, I guess that doesn't answer the question of is there a list of, yeah.
So I'm here, and I do not have a list of libraries who have resumed ILL services because it would have to include schools, academics, and publics, and it's over 500 libraries. So I've been sending out reminders for libraries to please use the holiday dates in Clover if you are not providing ILL services. And about the Courier drivers, I can check in with the Courier service. I don't know as the drivers are required to wear masks. I know that everyone in the warehouse is wearing masks and gloves when they're doing sorting. So they are not touching any of the materials physically. They're just sorting it and sending it on the way.
And remember, the
Um,
people at the warehouse never actually handle the books. They just handle the cloth bags.
yes.
So if when you're unpacking your bin, you take the materials out of the cloth bags and then let them sit for a few days, you should be okay.
If courier delivery personnel, Jeanette asked, will courier delivery personnel wear masks when entering buildings? If the building requires anyone who enters to wear a mask, they should. I will double check with the vendor to make sure that they have them on hand and can wear them when they're delivering.
Thank you
Any,
all so much. We still are here. We can go to 11:30 if you would like on any additional questions. I am so humble at all the questions that you are asking because that means that you are thinking through this process and what you would like to do for library services to your community and how to make that successful. I believe that a lot of people are going to be able to offer library services. It might not be in the way that they would like, but again, we are in uncharted territory during unexpected times, and this will go on until we are able to make sure that there is a therapeutic and a vaccine that will allow us to, in a sense, be much more like the past, even though we will never be going back to the past for a very, very long time.
Jason, there are a few questions and answers that we provided, so for the benefit of people who are on the call. Mary
Perfect.
Pat asked if we could get a library count at some point of who's thinking of opening June 1st. We are sending out a survey
We
as
are.
a follow-up to this to see who's planning on doing what. So we will make that available to everybody. And then Lori asked if the health screening for employees could be a self-reported Google form or a similar thing. And yes, it certainly
Yes.
can as long as you
Hmm.
trust folks to do it.
Do that.
We
I
we
would
do
say
it on email.
electronically, yes. Electronically allows us to just be contactless, and that is our process because one of the biggest things you will find from the state and VDH on this is try to have a contactless system of whatever you can do.
And then April, if you could respond to Margaret about taking materials out of courier bags before quarantining them, that would be helpful. And
Oh, I do see there's a question from Karen about assisting. Now here again is where we need to be a little bit more thoughtful. It's about any advice on assisting patrons on computers. Well, we all know that we're going to have people who are not as experienced within that, and therein lies an item for us to examine what this situation will look like if you're going to offer that type of service. Again, can the time frame be examined? You would probably be very close to being like a server at a restaurant if you were to go in to one that has outdoor seating, even though you're indoors, you're going to notice that they don't stay very quickly. They are going to be a little bit more distant from you. They're going to have on a mask. Some will even have on gloves. They're going to ask that you make sure that you have on a mask if you didn't wear it coming in. And so there's a lot of things versus, oh, just let me go ahead and start helping you. One, the goal of the reopening is to not necessarily have people congregate. And that's going to be something very, very unique. In old
thank you.
times, I would have suggested that the person come with a friend and you could talk to the friend and help that person help the person who is not having a good time on the computer. Unless that person's like a family member or living with them and they are very trusted, it would be difficult to assist the way that you might like. So that might need to be reconsidered for the length of time and how much help can be actually afforded a person who might not have good computer skills.
Well, and remember that that second person will take, hog a space if you're tight for space as well. There are questions about bathrooms. Those of you who only have one bathroom or no bathroom, the question is, it can be either hand sanitizing or bathroom, although
Mhm.
bathroom is preferred.
Correct.
And the other question is, do you have to make a bathroom available for your patrons if you only have one? you really need to decide that in your own context. Ideally, you would have that bathroom dedicated to staff so they can wash their hand and not make it available to the public. But it also depends on your local flow and how you can get people in and out. So again, it can be hand washing or hand sanitizer.
Mhm.
Okay, and then there are other questions. And again, there was a question, can you still order the sneeze guard? If you
Yes.
submit the form today, this morning, and I'm going to post the link again right now, you are welcome to. We are putting the order in this afternoon. So yes, you should, even though the deadline was last week, but we haven't ordered yet. So please do. And let me
I
go find
saw
that link.
a question, I think, from Marie about staff tracking for health. That is primarily for the days the persons are coming in to work. I mean, we have nothing from the state where I ask my staff every day whether they're coming to work or not if they're healthy. But yes, the days that they're going to physically come to the location, you would want to do the health screening. All right, are there any other questions?
Curious about the sneeze guard. How does it work? Hang on a second, Marie. If you're moving around your library shelving books. So if you're moving around your library shelving books and there are other people in the building, you should be wearing a mask. The staff is really supposed to be wearing a mask, or don't need to if they are behind the sneeze guard. But if you're in and out, you really should be wearing a mask.
And that brings up again another item that we are so wonderfully happy you have decided to come to this webinar. The question on the reshelving, that's a library operation that might need to be rethought because you need to be practicing the 6-foot rule. When will these things now get done? If you know that your library might be a little bit busier, particularly when you reopen, you may have to adjust. Not saying that you can't, I'm just saying you are thinking through all of your logistical behavior. In the olden time, you would say, sure, hang on a second, I'm going to start shelving books and talk to you since I know you. In this aspect, you might not feel as comfortable, or one of your staff persons might not feel that comfortable to do that, not in the presence of a person, but to say, we don't have enough space for me to be apart from this. You might want to rethink that and say, when do we want to start doing those items?
Okay, and then the question about sneeze guards, they're standalone, Carrie. So they sit on their own. They have little legs, so you could put them anywhere. They don't need to be attached. And then Susan O'Connell had a question. Her board believes firmly that patrons should have a bathroom. That is really up to you. Bathrooms are not required. So it is up to you to figure out how you can make the flow happen if you do decide to make a bathroom available to your patrons.
And I think that's also kind of a question by Nancy about that, saying she heard that if you have a public building and it's open, they must make the public bathroom available to the public. And that's something I'd like to research because I'm not exactly sure on that.
Yep, that's a good one to research. Okay, so I posted, just one second, I posted the sneeze guard link. If you can fill it out immediately, that would help us. So it's right there in the chat. If anybody, we'll also send it out in the follow-up email if you don't have access to the chat. And I think there was a question from a phone caller.
I'm on my computer, but my chat seems to be disabled. May I ask a question?
Yes.
Okay. I'm wondering about the health surveys. I've looked a little bit on the ACCD website. Is there an established form that you should be using for a healthcare survey, or is it just a series of sample questions about cough, sneeze, temperature, feeling ill?
You're kind of in the general ballpark. There isn't a formal per se, because I think each business and entity is a little bit different. Some are asking, believe it or not, some very full questions in certain businesses that I have actually seen. But what most people are utilizing are about 3 to 5 questions, and they are usually, have you had any illnesses in the last 2 or 3 days? Do you have a headache? Have you traveled outside the state of Vermont for any reason?
So we should develop our own in our own form to be used.
Correct. And we can give you what we have from the state perspective, because that's what we are required to use, and we can pass that on to you. But they're like 5 questions, really quick and simple. And within that, they're usually what we also have to post, where if a person has answered yes to one of those, then it might require some further conversations, particularly the outside traveling to Vermont.
Okay, and then I have just a follow-up question about thermometers. So it sounds like taking a temperature for an employee, if you're open to the public, is required? Daily temperature taking is required, or am I misunderstanding that?
When a person is coming to work,
Yes.
that would be when. And yes, especially if they're going to have exposure, but the consideration is very unique, because a lot of people understand that thermometers are in high demand, and no
Yes.
one kind of really wants to utilize the old way of using the thermometer, the mercury or the alcohol, because that's going to be like your own personal one.
Right.
And so within that, people are saying until that is available and people can have those, you're almost doing the honor system to say.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that for me. I appreciate it.
And Shana, sorry, just posted a ACCD health check form in form of a PDF. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate that.
Oh, there it is. Perfect.
And Margaret asked if we need to do the staff health check even if the library is not open to the public. Yes.
Yes.
Anytime you have staff entering the building.
Mm-hmm. Or trustees or people with a key.
Dina says, not sure how I feel about turning people away if they've traveled outside of Vermont recently. Dina, I think you do need to turn them away, because they're supposed to be self-quarantining.
And we have signage on that. And again, we can share that from the state, from our own perspective. We have that too, where I would have to tell our staff persons, you are not able to come into work today. We will work with you. For the public, those are items that can be posted, and it is, I would say, very highly suggested that you find a way to communicate to people, either on websites, listservs, that these are the questions that you need to remember to consider before entering into our location, because we want to, again, in a positive way, say we want to decrease the effects of COVID-19. We don't want to spread it. And here's why we are trying to do this as a community. Are you going to have some people who are going to say, I don't believe in this? Of course. Your goal is that you did state, you did post, and you did all you could. Now, if you have the people tell you, yes, I travel out of state, then you are kind of obligated to tell them, I don't think you should come into this facility, because given that you have said yes to this, we have those who are in specific states of health, and that might also impact not only the community, but also our library employees. We belatedly ask you to not enter our location, and we can give you library services an alternative way if all possible.
Yeah, and I want to clarify, so there's a bit of a discussion going on here with Marie and Erica. So the ACCD form questionnaire doesn't ask about travel. Remember, that is the staff form, and presumably, obviously you can ask that question, and presumably you would know if your staff is traveling outside of the state. The signage that goes on the door to your public does include the message, stay away if you have been traveling out of state. And again, you won't be asking your patrons all of those questions. They will self-identify and hopefully self-quarantine. So there's the required signage versus the health survey that you're asking your staff, and they're two slightly different things.
This is Tom again. As far as I know, the requirement to self-quarantine for 14 days,
correct,
if you've been out of the state for any reason, has not changed.
That is correct.
Well, actually, I think it's 7 days now, and then you
Oh,
have
is
the
it
option to
7?
test.
Okay.
Well, then you can get a test, and if you're negative,
Well,
then
but put it
yeah.
that way, there is a test you can take, but it's still 14 days is on the books to make sure that you don't pass along anything if you can get the test. And right now, VDH is saying that they have enough tests to test people at day 7. But at least means 7 days you still have to self quarantine, but the possibility of if you choose not to get the test, then you have to do 14.
Yes, that's right. And there are questions, Susan, you know, if somebody goes to New Hampshire to get gas or has an appointment at Dartmouth, that's out of state.
Mhm.
I, I, I really think that we can't really overthink this.
That's the
It,
best way to put that because I
eh,
have had some people tell me, well, you know, I just went past Brattleboro to pick up a lottery ticket or I got gas. Again, we ask and we hope that we're all honest and we can all take our own good measures to make sure that we are reducing the spread. But that's what the rule stipulates, and each person has to make a very wise decision.
so I want to give phone folks a chance to ask their questions one last time. And see if there are any before we wind down. We have about 7 more minutes to go.
Oh, I like
Anybody out
Karen.
there?
Karen LaRue made me laugh.
Yeah, me too. Karen works in Vermont but lives in New Hampshire, and there
And we
is a
do have a lot.
commuter.
Yes, we do have that situation with the state, and people forget that we have people coming into the Northeast Kingdom from Canada. We also have people coming in from Plattsburgh, and these are frontline workers and healthcare workers as well. So there is not saying leeway, but it is very understandable based on a variety of aspects as well.
And Laura just posted the entire rule on commuter day trip traffic to and from Vermont. So there's some clarification on the ACCD website as well. So do look for that there. And it looks like we don't have any call-in questions. So I hope that we've responded to all questions that don't require research, and we're going to go over the chat again to make sure that we have, and if we haven't, we can do that in a follow-up email. We are sending out a survey to you. Hopefully you can respond to that and give us more information. And Jason, is there anything you wanted to add? Oh yeah, and if you want to order sneeze guards, do it now.
Yes. And I see some people are now kind of struggling because I think Susan and Peacham was saying like, oh, we have a staff member who lives with us but works in New Hampshire. Again, these are the nuances of that. And I can't be the official person. I know what some people might say no is fully a no, but it is something that we have to all be thoughtful about. And again, it's a nuance. As I just said, we have people coming in from Canada into Northeast Kingdom to do work. We have people coming in from New Hampshire to Vermont to also work. And there are a lot of things where if one can take as much precaution as possible, we believe things would be successful. But I am not the authority to say, no, this should not actually happen, or yes, it should. It is make sure that we are all trying to follow health and wellness. And with that, we believe we will be successful in mitigating and reducing spread.
Yep, and you know where to find us. So if you have questions as you think about this, please be in touch. And remember, this is not a competition with your neighbor library. You need to do what's best for you.
Correct. And as we close out, again, thank you so much for taking the time to be on our webinar today. We really hope that it's been beneficial to allay some concerns, reduce some anxiety, and begin the slow, methodical, and thoughtful process of what services you would now like to offer. And if applicable to your community and your heart's desire with health and safety, legal and HR concerns all in check, you may begin to figure out how you wish to reopen your library on June 1st or shortly thereafter, or continue to do what you like to do until a more applicable time. We are here to assist you, and feel free to reach out to us at any point where we can assist you. Thank you for joining today's webinar. And again, I, your state librarian, humbly thank you for doing the work that you do and hope to in the future come out and visit at your library, because those who know me know I do tend to bring a lot of treats that are home baked. And so I hope to visit with you in the near future and come out to see your wonderful libraries and your staff after this is all completed. Take care, and you'll have a survey later on today.